Like and subscribe for endless entertainment. Our story starts off with our MC walking to the store. A crowd suddenly bursts out and knocks the phone out of his hand. A man follows after them with a people penetrator and attacks the frightened women. So he tackles the man to the floor, then tells them to run, but realizes that his insides are leaking out. The women begin crying over their savior while he fades into the shadow realm. Cain awakens in a strange room and finds that two babes are taking really good care of him. He realizes that he is in another body and has the appropriate reaction to finding out this fact. His mother reveals that he has been asleep for a week and goes to get something for him to eat, while Cain comes to the conclusion that he didn't survive getting penetrated and surprisingly accepts his passing really fast. Sylvia comes in to see Cain being greatly disappointed and goes to have a peek for herself. She begins feeding our little one and lift him up until he burps, then leaves the room. He goes to dinner and finds out that he has an older sister and his mom is the second wife, but he also has two older brothers from the first wife. While his father is a noble whose mission is to protect the borders of the kingdom, he finds out that in this world there are monsters and adventures that used magic, unlike his old world where he had no living relatives to spend time with. Cain asks his father if he can learn magic, but they reveal that he must wait until the age of 5 to be baptized first. He proves them wrong and begins flexing his plot power while hiding it from Sylvia. Then his perfectly normal and not at all mentally insane sister starts to teach him about the outside world. 2 years later, Cain gets ready to attend his baptism. They take a carriage to go towards the church where he learns that at the ceremony he will meet the gods to gain their protection from level 1 to 5. And this will determine his magic aptitude. They enter the church and bow before the sacred altar. The Pope starts the ritual for his baptism and Cain is transported to the Holy Land to meet the 7 great gods of this world. The god of death reveals that he wasn't supposed to get unalived because the criminal would have tripped and been restrained by the residents. However, since he got smoke for a good reason, she decided to respawn him in this world. The god of magic comes over and gives him her protection, so the god of creation did the same. Then the god of war. Then the god of technology. Then the god of commerce, and finally the god of earth gives him her gift. After becoming overpowered, they send him back to the real world. His father asks to see his status, so he makes an excuse, then runs to a very good hiding spot and sees that he got the MC treatment. He realizes that all his protections are 10 even though the max should be 5, but creation does him a solid and shows him how to hide how broken he is. Cain heads back to celebrate his 5th birthday and drinks some lean with his family. They asks about his protection, so he shows them his altered stats and they begin freaking out because his powers are still way too high for his age. His father forbids him from showing his stats to anyone else or he could be seen as a threat to the kingdom. Cain goes to his room and conveniently finds a summoning book. He decides that he wants to summon something cute to play with and heads outside to call forth a very fluffy, giant angry monster that's on demon time. Cain's sister gets scared, so he goes over to defend her. He jumps at the creature with a fireball and receives a fisting, but he finds the strength to return the creature to the book. The women begin crying over their savior while he fades into the shadow realm, but this time he wakes up and is perfectly fine. Cain ends off his birthday by thanking everyone for coming to his party and proclaims that his goal is to be an adventurer so he can travel the world. The next day, Cain finds out that a tutor for him will be arriving soon. He lies in his bed thinking about the possibilities, but he spots someone coming from the windows and teleports into some nice fluffy stress relievers. He recovers from their embrace and finds out that these busted bad bees are his new tutors for the next 3 years. They go to the training ground where he practices swordsmanship and flexes on the trainer, so she decides to go around with him. Cain begins easily overwhelming her even when he's not looking at what they're doing, so she gives up and sends him over to Nina for magic training. Cain chooses to crush her soul by using all the elements, which is something that the strongest mages can't even do. They realize that there's nothing to teach him and sees that he has 3 protections at the moment. The tutors decide that the training ground is too small for him and goes to his father to request for Cain to be trained outside of the mansion. He agrees to their demands with the condition that they return before sundown. They head outside the walls and find a nice rock that Cain chooses to obliterate into nothingness. The tutor senses a monster incoming and spots a rabbit dog that charges towards them. But Cain sends it to the afterlife, then puts its loot box in his inventory for safekeeping. After seeing that the toddler took a life, the tutors decides to search for more animals for him to slaughter. Cain copies Nina's skill to find the harmless creatures and runs off to send them to heaven. He tries to chase after them, but the tutors stop him because the dark side of the forest is a pathway to many monsters that some consider to be unnatural. They go to the guild hall to get some higher-leveled missions to take on, but a grunt steps up to become a victim of the MC by harassing the tutors. Cain gives him a taste of the ass beating he's about to receive, but the fool chooses to draw a blade. So he activates Ultra Instincts to dodge everything, then catches his blade and takes out the trash before doing the same to his allies. The tutors thank their student for saving them and heads into the forest to continue his training. 3 years later, Cain returns to his home where Sylvia tells him that his tutors are done scamming his family. So Cain decides that he'll get them gifts as going-away presents. He teleports outside, then heads into the very dangerous forest where he spots a gorilla and gives it all the smoke. Then he wanders around and finds an unfortunate creature to erase from existence and leaves before anyone finds him. The next day, Cain tasks if all dogs go to heaven. They go over and tell him that he graduated. So he presents them with 2 bags that have enough space to hold an entire mansion, along with a safety feature that makes it heavy to anyone trying to steal it. They give him some head for payment and go off into the world to potentially finesse another rich family. 2 years later, Cain finds himself heading towards the capital to attend an event held for nobles. He sends out his UAV to reveal that a battle is going on against monsters and the humans are losing. So he heads outside and becomes the Flash to arrive at the battlefield in time. He begins cutting down all the monsters, then swaps to a real sword to finish off all the remaining oversized porks. The night collapses, so he goes over and uses healing magic to return everyone to full health while taking the fallen into his inventory. His father arrives on the battlefield and sees that the carriage belongs to the princess and the duke's daughter of their kingdom. They thank Cain for saving them, but Telestia is feeling stressed, so Cain uses Riz magic to make the noble women climax with happiness. Both of the women begins fighting over who should be with the Riz king and reveals that they are also on their way to the noble event. So they kidnap him in front of his father and drives off with their victim. On the carriage, the 2 women continue to bully him until they arrive at the mansion where they start to bully his father, so he agrees to allow them to stay in one room together. Inside the room, the 2 psychopaths push their beds to connect with his and begins to use temptation until he allows them to sleep with him. The next day, Cain is tired because they went at it all night, but he managed to arrive in the capital of the kingdom. He exits the carriage and finds a knight who thanks him for protecting his men and the noble women. Cain takes out all the loot box he took and praises them for buying time, but when he tries to leave, the knight reveals that he has a meeting with the king. He bows before his majesty and they begin deriding Cain for all he did for them in such a short time. They award the 10-year-old by making him a baron and gives him a mansion with some bread. A nobleman steps up to dispute the decisions, but the king scolds him for being stupid, then he kindly goes back into line. The king brings the meeting to an end and tells him that they will meet in private. He sits with his father as the king comes in to greet them. The king once more thanks Cain along with the duke for saving their spawns and offers him their daughter's hands in marriage. He protests it, but they start to gaslight him into agreeing with them. The child turns to his father, who abandons him in his time of need, so he is forced to accept their marriage proposals. The next day, Cain takes his sister shopping but escapes the boring hell. He spots the furry from his younger days and she tells him that she's doing child labor at her uncle's shop. He asks the man for a meeting in private to introduce him to the totally original board game called Reversi that he wishes to sell. The shopkeeper loves his idea and creates a prototype for Cain to see, but reveals that even though it may be brilliant, they don't have enough money to produce it. So Cain flexes his wealth and becomes the sponsor for his business. The shopkeeper brings it to the god of commerce's altar to copyright their very original product, and they steal it to play in the Holy Land. Cain leaves to finally attend his debut ceremony. He goes over to the Duke where his fiancée greets him, so Cain shows why he is the Riz god. But the Duke interrupts them before they're forced to get a mop. The king enters the ceremony and makes a toast with everyone. Cain heads over to give Telestia that noble Riz, and even the king admits it's smooth while his daughter peeks beside him. He presents the king with a game of reversey and is told to meet with him later. They head downstairs where his parents abandon him to do work. But Silk comes over to take the chance to give him some lean, then she puts him on the chair and attempts to assault him. 3 boys interrupt them and begin to bully Cain, then the foolish children challenge the demon to a fight. They go outside and one of the boys takes out his book to channel mana into the wrong head, then calls down the power of gods to launch a mighty flicker of flame. The other boy gives it a try and uses pecker magic to call forth the power to get rock hard, but it's still too small. Silk steps up and begins deriding Cain and explains that he is actually the Baron that massacred many monsters to save her life. They begin to bow and apologize to him before fading back into being background characters. Telestia suddenly arrives outside and begins wondering what happened. So Silk tells her that she's going on a date with Cain, and she begins freaking out until the Riz god promises to bring both of them on dates. The king interrupts the Riz session and scolds Cain for being the reason the girl's knees are weak. They hand over the key to his mansion and he heads over to find a rundown house. But when he heads inside, it's much worse than he could have thought. Cain decides to use repair magic to fix everything that could be wrong with the mansion and hears that Sylvia has arrived to be the head maid of his home. The maids attempts to do their job but find everything already clean, so they go to do other maid things. The butler reminds him that his brother is visiting today and he heads home where his older siblings congratulates him for all his accomplishments. They head to his new home to see his newly repaired mansion and begins to explore all the rooms, but his father tells him that it needs some personality, so he gives it some. They hear the maids screaming and runs over to see them, frightened by the dragon he placed. His father begins freaking out because he defeated a dragon at his age, but admits that it's pretty cool. Cain hears his mom screaming and rushes over to find that he installed a butthole tickler in his toilet. So his father gives it a try and kindly requests one in their home as well. In the night, Cain begins planning for the opening of his party and sends out invitation to everyone but the king. He begins crafting wine cups along with champagne and hamburgers for his opening debut. Sylvia has a taste and gets a foodgasm, then takes a sip of heaven but finds that she may be an alcoholic. The butler comes in and says that they have a guest. He goes to meet with the king and finds that he is upset because everyone else got an invitation and they have been teasing him with it. However, Cain explains that he wanted to hand an invitation to him personally, so he begins flexing on the duke. On the night of the party, all the guests begins to arrive in their carriages. They head inside and meets with the glorious dragon. Then he carries them to the dining hall and proposes a toast to all his guests who get sent to beverage heaven. The king arrives at the party where he is served with the first plate of hamburger, which sends his taste buds to heaven, and he begins praising even the animals that pass to make it. The queen discovers the surprise in the bathroom and calls over the king to experience the butt blaster. He exits the bathroom and commands Cain to install it in his castle and praises him for his hospitality while everyone claps in agreement. The super hater arrives late to the event and thanks Cain for the invitation to his doghouse. He sees the dragon and nearly has a heart attack, then continues walking to the dining area and is first served with wine. He has a taste of heaven but continues to hate. Then he receives the food that he hates so much that he asks for more. Cain brings over some wine glasses to the hater, but he asks for all of them. Cain explains that the glasses are for all the guests, and the noble begins acting like an a-hole until he's confronted by the king. The beta gets on his knees and is scolded for abusing his power before fading into the background. The next day, Cain meets with the knight to get a storage area for his material, but the room he has is too small. So they go into the yard where Cain takes out all the monsters he slaughtered so far. The knight is surprised and questions if he is a disciple of the gods, and Cain freezes up, then makes a very believable excuse. He tries to leave, but the knight invites him to train with his men in the courtyard. The first victim comes forward and foolishly decides to give Cain the first move, allowing him to use flash step and turn the knight into a casualty. Their captain arrives on the training grounds and begins embracing Cain, but she finds out that he's really strong and challenges the child to a fight. Tefana draws her blade and charges at him. They begin to clash many times on equal terms until Cain uses a boost spell to speed past her and claims the victory for himself. After being defeated, Tefana decides that she'll make Cain her wife. He says she's too old, but she proclaims that age is just a number and goes to the king to tell him the good news, with Cain willingly following behind. She takes him to the throne room and informs them of her plans to marry him. The king reveals that the elves are a race that were enslaved in the past, but the first king saved their kind and made them an independent kingdom under his rule, so technically Tefana is a princess. Then he informs her that Cain is already engaged to 2 other women. But instead of giving up, she doubles down on her decisions and leaves with her hostage by her side. The king is surprised that he defeated her because she is the strongest in the kingdom. But the knight reveals that Cain might be a disciple of God, so they decide to test him. The knight finds Cain walking while very exhausted. He explains that every day Tefana has taken him away and goes very hardcore with him until he can go no more. He tries to run from her, but the knight takes him into the throne room. The king gives him a book written by the first king filled with advanced magic. Cain opens it and is amazed by all the spells inside, but the king reveals that no one could read that text because it's written in Japanese. They asks Cain who he really is. He explains that he has memories from his past life in a different world. They ask to see his status window, and he shows them how broken he really is. The king reveals that if he showed them, everyone would have worshipped him like a holy figure. But Cain explains that he loves his new life and all the people that he has met throughout the years, so he would like everything to remain as it is. The king accepts his decision and asks him to become the new king, but before he answers, Tefana comes in with a marriage letter from her father and gently carries her wife to the training grounds to show him some love. Meanwhile, the king swears everyone inside the room to secrecy and entrusts the safety of the kingdom to Cain. The next day we find Cain reading the first king's journal, where he explains that he's also a reincarnation from Japan. But he suddenly gets ambushed by his harem and is forced to escape the women. Our MC runs all the way home to put on some new drip so he can finally become an adventurer. He goes inside the guild house and bumps into Claude, who tells him to be careful on his first few missions. Cain continues to the secretary's desk to officially register as an adventurer, and he gives his life fluids to the Herpy crystal to gain his guild card, but they start our overpowered MC at G rank. Some future victims comes over to earn an ass beating and finds out that Cain knows instant transmission along with some mastered ultra instincts. So their leader goes to draw his blade, but Claude steps in to stop a massacre. He threatens the villains with penetration from his long sword, so they decide to retreat while their back doors remain intact. They thank him for stepping in to help them, and he decides to have a drink with Cain. Claude asks how our MC fights so well, and he tells him that he learned from another adventurer who suspiciously also have red hair. Claude reveals that he is an A rank, but one day he wants to make it to SSS rank like the first king. But the Dream Shatterer comes over to gently greet her husband and questions why he's drinking with a little one. They explain what happened with the grunts, but she dismisses it and peacefully takes her husband to head out on their next mission. Cain goes to select a quest from the board and finds one that involves slaughtering the innocent wildlife, so he's overjoyed to accept it. He begins his adventure, but finds Tefana's stress relievers in his face and tells her that he's going on his first mission, so she decides to abandon her duty to follow him on his journey despite his protests. Cain tries to escape, but he wasn't fast enough and gets kidnapped by his wife. The loving couple travels through the forest together, but Cain senses that someone is in trouble ahead. They find some goblins surrounding a helpless man and goes over to heal the victim, while Tefana begins making all their enemies past tense. More enemies appear, so Cain uses magic to give her the legendary waifu buff, and she uses her newfound strength to commit genocide on all the unfortunate goblins that wanders into her path. Some more innocent wildlife appear, but Cain wants to take them on this time and starts off by blinding the creatures before showing them the way to meet Lizard Jesus. He returns to the guild house and tells the secretary everything that happened, but she begins freaking out and runs to her chief to repeat what she heard. He invites Cain to his office to ask where he got the green lizards and begins to accuse him of trying to scam them for money. He revokes Cain's guild card, then asks him to leave, but the guild master enters the room after hearing the commotion. The chief tells him what happened, but the guild master takes a seat and begins laughing at the idiot. He allows Tefana to enter, and she immediately goes to embrace her husband, to everyone's surprise. The guild master begins deriding Cain as hard as possible and reveals that he is also Tefana's brother, which makes him Cain's future brother-in-law. The chief begins begging him for forgiveness, and our MC graciously accepts his apology. Then the guild master decides to give the strongest person in their kingdom a rank and sends his underlings away to do the paperwork. Meanwhile, the gods spy on the underage child and question if they made him too strong, but creation reveals that the seal on the great evil will be broken soon, so Cain must get much more powerful to be able to protect the world. The next day, Cain is woken up by Sylvia because he's late for his exams, but he can just teleport to school. Our MC goes to the front desk and gets a room number, but he doesn't recognize anyone on the class list. The exams begins with a written test, but Cain has no problem with this section and finishes with enough time to take a nap. The next exam is a practical to test the student's magic ability. All the students try their best to launch a flicker of flame at the target, but Cain steps up to style on all his classmates by using the spirit gun to blast a hole through the walls and putting anyone standing behind on a t-shirt. The final test is a sword fight against high-ranked adventurers, but Claude recognizes Cain and goes over to challenge him to a duel. The fight starts off with them clashing blades on even terms, but Claude begins to get excited and loses himself in the thrill of battle. The teacher brings an end to the duel and scolds them for traumatizing the other students before telling Cain that he passed the test. The next day, Cain is called into the king's room because of the destruction he caused, and it's revealed that he took the exams with the commoners instead of the other nobles. He goes down to check his score, where Silk informs him that he came number 1 in the whole school, but warns him that if he disappears again there will be punishment. Cain goes to the school's entrance ceremony where he meets with 2 of his wives and begins using his max level riz to make their legs shake like earthquakes. He walks in front of his classmates to give a speech as the number 1 student and tells them that he plans to make friends at the academy, whether they be nobility or peasants. It's announced that the king has come to give a few words, and he begins telling the students to be careful during the school year, so hopefully nothing else explodes, while singling out no specific destructive person. They exit the Great Hall to find that a few a-holes are harassing a furry, and the prick turns around to find our MC behind them. He tells them to leave his friend alone, but they threaten to ruin the furry's family business. But the Duke's daughter, along with the royal princess, steps up to scold them for being idiots, and they go over to apologize to their victim before fading away to become background characters. She thanks the Riz god for saving her, but his harem comes over to have a nice and peaceful talk with her. The psycho duo forced Cain to go on his knees while they take the furry to a corner to trade their secrets. He suddenly hears a voice in his head that calls him over to meet in the library, but when he enters the room, our MC gets abducted and finds himself behind a mysterious man making coffee. He turns around to reveal that he's the first king of their kingdom, but Cain begins freaking out because he would be over 300 years old and scans the king to find out that he's a god of creation of this new world he made. Yuya explains that the gods asked him to train Cain to prepare for a great evil that once manipulated the kingdoms to cause untold disasters in the world long ago. Cain questions why Yuya can't fight against him, but he explains that gods are bound to their world and are unable to intervene directly in any way. Yuya takes him to the ocean and tells him that his first test will be to return to the mansion while defeating all the innocent wildlife he comes across. Cain begins slaughtering all the animals that he can get his hands on, but finds that they're much stronger than the creatures he's used to tormenting. He hears the sound of something crying in the distance and finds a good boy that's been heavily injured. Our MC goes over to up his KD, but decides that he will protect it instead and use the last of his strength to heal the doggy before going into sleep mode. Cain awakens to find that Haku was defending him while he was unconscious and decides to choose him as a starter Pokemon. Our new party continues their journey together and travel through the forest until they finally arrive at the mansion. Cain heads inside, where Yuya reveals that 4 years have passed in this world, but only 4 days went by in the other one. He decides to tell Cain the full story about the enemy, and explains that Aaron was the god of amusement who made people play games that ended many lives, so the other gods were forced to banish him from their realm. Yuya reveals that he was summoned to this world along with Cain's parents after having a meeting with Trukuin, but soon after they met with the gods who begged them to defeat Aaron by sealing him in a magical item. During the fight, none of their spells or attacks were able to hurt Aaron, while he used a spell to massacre Yuya's party, including Cain's mother, who chose to take one for the team. His father became enraged and charged at the god, but ended up getting penetrated by him. Seeing that Aaron is held in place, Yuya hits him with the Master Ball and captures him inside the prison realm to save this world from his evil. The first king introduces Cain to Durain to begin his training in hand-to-hand combat, but when they fight he gets fisted straight into sleep mode. Cain awakens in a house and finds Durain and his wife sitting downstairs. He sees a baby dragon and goes down to meet it, but Haku doesn't like to share its master. Before a fight breaks out, the wife shows them that dinner is ready and Cain goes to eat good food for the first time in 4 years. They continue their training with Cain slowly getting better, and over the course of a year he gets good enough to match Durain's power and breaks his sword to bring an end to his training. He thanks him for everything before running to the mansion where he finds Yuya kneeling at his parents' resting place. Cain collapses in front of their loot boxes and thanks Yuya for taking care of them all this time and decides that he's ready to go home. The first king turns him back into his illegal form before Durain comes to give him another Pokemon to take with him to his world. He thanks them for their training as he begins to teleport, but Yuya gives him a present for the king as he leaves them. Cain returns to the mansion and finds that everyone was there waiting for him to return. His harem presents him with burnt cookies and he eats them like a munch while he leaks his man juices all over them. The next day he goes to the king and tells them what happened to him. He presents them with Yuya's sword and they accept that Cain really met the first king and was trained by him. They reveal that his rank quest came and he needs to do it or his guild card will be cancelled. Cain goes to the guild master where he explains that to keep his current rank Cain must complete a bandit clearing quest, so he decides to accept and deal with them right now. Our MC teleport to the forest and begins soaring through the sky until he finds some bandits causing trouble for travelers. He lands on the ground and realizes that his old teachers have been protecting a carriage. Cain heals Millie's wounds before he easily takes out all the bandits foolish enough to face him in combat and restrains the poor bastards. They question why he's on such a high-ranked mission and he reveals that he is an A rank, which freaks them out because he skipped all the steps. They give the bandits the walk of shame, then hands them over to the guild to complete his mission to stay as an A rank. Some grunts begins harassing his harem again, but Cain puts a stop to it. They recognize him from the ass beating he gave them years ago and begins to back away, but Claude comes over to see what's happening. It's revealed that Millie is Claude's sister and he decides to have a drink with a side of abuse. They begin having some lean where Claude finds out that Cain is an A rank, but he expected it since he is so strong. Cain's teacher shows off the magic bag that he gave them and Claude's wife begins freaking out and kindly asks him to make one for her. So he agrees to do it before the drunk falls asleep on top of him. Claude retrieves his abuser as Cain realizes that he missed a week of school, so he has to leave to go and catch up. The secretary comes over to ask if they would like to substitute the adventurer class for a day, and Claude begins coming up with an idea. The next day, Cain goes to magic class to show off his new spells, but he's forbidden from participating in this class since he destroyed the barrier last time. Cain goes to the adventurers class and finds that his friends will be teaching them some tricks today. Claude asks for all the students to take out their guild card, but Cain refuses to do it because he doesn't want to become an outcast of the class for having a gold card and says that he left it at home. His friends realizes that he's isolated from the class and move all the students to the training ground to help them become better adventurers. Cain goes to fight Claude, however he's cut off by another student, so he goes over to Nina, but she reminds him that he's not allowed to use magic. Our MC stands alone in class as the adventurers reveals that their plan is to leave Cain for last, so when he shows off his skills he'll become the hero of his class. Cain stands in a line to do battle with Claude and waits until he defeats the last student, but when it's his turn to flex on the other students the bells rings, which brings an end to the school day. Claude apologizes for not keeping track of the time and the class thanks the adventurers for teaching them before they leave the school. Later on, Cain takes out his anger on Mother Nature and begins slaughtering all the innocent creatures that he comes across before summoning a meteor shower to make sure nothing survives his onslaught. The soldiers rushes to the forest because they think a monster has come, but when his father arrives all he finds is a crater with his son's handkerchief inside. The king tells Cain what his father reported in the forest and he tries to lie about it, but with a little push from the king Cain snitches on himself. At a cave far away, we find Aaron's seal breaking apart as a dragon eats his shard and allows a part of the god to be reborn in his body to take revenge on the world. The next day, his teacher decides to teach the students how to use summoning magic and all the students begin calling forth cute creatures to bond with. However, when our Cain steps up to give it a try, the teacher begins freaking out as he calls forth Seth, the Prince of Darkness, into this world. Thinking fast, Cain decides to blind all of his classmates. Seth scans all of Cain's stats, then falls to his knees to beg our MC not to end him and promises that he'll do anything he wants. Cain decides to form a contract with the demon lord before sending him back to wherever he came from. The teacher asks what the fork just happened and Cain tries to lie to them, but no one believes that shit and they call him before the king. He confesses to them that he formed a contract with the demon lord and they explain how dangerous he is. The snitch teacher questions how much magic he has. So the king asks Cain to show them his new stats, but when he opens the window it reveals that Cain is now a demigod and the snitch kneels to his new idol. Cain tells them that he wants to be treated like everyone else, so the king accepts his wishes, but decides to give the 12-year-old child the Viscount title along with a town to rule over. He heads home and tells Sylvia all the good news, but the butler comes in and tells them that his homeland is under attack from monsters. Cain goes to his hometown to meet with Jin, where he reveals that he sent many adventurers into the forest to fight the monsters, but they found that the creatures are out of control. Cain decides to go investigate himself, but Jin protests his decision until our MC flexes his gold card to prove how overpowered he is. Cain goes to their guild hall and meets with the furry to ask about the situation. She reveals that all the adventurers who entered the forest has been seriously injured as Cain's teachers enters the room. They explain to him that all the high-ranking adventurers have been called here to fight the monsters, but Cain tells them that he is going to head into the forest alone. He summons Haku and Jin to join him on his journey, then uses his search ability but feels that something is watching from afar while our MC participates in his favorite activity. Cain decides to summon Seth to this world and he greets his master in a very normal way. He asks the demon to find out what's wrong with this forest, so Seth decides to summon a butler that specializes in investigation. He turns around to see Cain and greets him with perfect form. Cain asks him to find out what went wrong with the forest, and the butler calls forth a very deep hole filled with insects swimming in unspeakable fluids to search the forest for monsters. Many high-level dragons rise from the forest, so Cain gives them a one-way ticket to the gates of heaven and returns holding all his loot to tell them to continue investigating while he leaves. Cain appears in front of his teachers to show them what they're up against when Claude arrives and realizes that they can't allow the monsters to get inside the town or everyone will become past tense. Meanwhile, Seth and his butler continues walking through the forest, but Aaron takes notice of their presence and commands his monsters to charge forward to destroy everything that gets in their way. Seth decides to head to his master and tells him that the monsters have begun to charge towards the city. Cain decides to head into the forest while everyone stays and defend the town. But before he can go, Tefana confronts her husband and falls into his arms. She tells him that the knights have been called to help with the monsters and she wishes to come with him, but he tells her to stay so she can take care of his home while he's gone. The butler serves all the dragons some death until Cain arrives to continue his fight against Mother Nature. They sense that Aaron is waiting for them deep inside the forest and he taunts our hero for being so slow. Seth tells him to go fight the god while he stays back to stop the monsters from reaching the town, and they part ways to accomplish their tasks. The adventurers sense that many monsters are running to the town, so Millie convinces the side characters that they must help Cain to fight against them because they're his teachers and he's just a child. Seth summons his 4 heavenly kings to ask them to help in clearing out the monster, and they begin guiding all the lost animals to an early afterlife. We go over to the adventurers who are struggling with the monsters that manages to bypass the demons and finds that they're beginning to get overwhelmed. But right as our heroes are about to fall, Tefana joins them on the battlefield along with all her knights so they can defend the town together. Cain travels through the forest while bringing disaster everywhere he goes until another blast comes that matches his power. Aaron shows himself on the battlefield and explains that this game is to find out how long it takes for all the humans to be eaten by the monsters. The god looks into his eyes, then remembers the people who sealed him away, and Cain reveals that they were his parents. So Aaron begins attacking him out of anger, but our MC uses Inferno to feed the dragon something spicy. However, it wasn't enough to put him down for good, and he continues his assault on our hero. Cain flies away with the dragon following close behind, but he turns around to summon his Pokemon so they can introduce Aaron to the floor. The god uses tail whip on Haku to take him out the fight and prepares to find out if all dogs go to heaven, but Jin goes over to take one for the team. Cain heads to protect his Pokemon from the flamethrower and manages to push it away. He remembers all the people that he's trying to protect and call upon the power of friendship to use a blast of light to enter a key blast power struggle with Eren. But Cain easily overwhelms the evil god and causes an explosion that can be seen by everyone close to the battlefield. He continues the blast until his Pokemon tells him to stop attacking. Then Seth comes over to reveal that Cain won this battle long ago and was just causing more destruction. They tell him that after Eren's defeat, the monsters started to retreat back into the forest and everyone is now safe from their attack. Cain returns to the adventures and gets embraced by his harem as they laugh from the victory they earned today. Our MC returns to the capital where the king thanks him for saving his kingdom and grants him his own domain within the region. But when he tells his family, they reveal that it's one of the worst regions to rule over in this world. Cain goes to his domain and begins by showing all his citizens who is really in charge of his land. Then he goes to have tea with his harem, but the Prince of Darkness suddenly teleports to him and asks for help because his wife kicked him out after finding him exploring another queen's castle. She follows Seth to Cain's home to retrieve her property and asks him what she thinks of what Seth has done. Cain scolds him for cheating and she agrees with his decisions, so his harem steps in to deliver a vicious tongue lashing upon the demon lord. The queen takes a liking to them and warns the demigod about keeping them safe before taking her victim home to discipline him. Cain ends off the day by creating a castle big enough for all his harem to live in together with him as he continues to live in this new world where he has many people to love and protect.
Like for a cat girl, subscribe for a waifu, and remember to stay swifty.